What's good, everybody out there on YouTube? This is your man Shadicstick dropping some hot frog on this mic. Today we're going to be talking about PlayStation, more specifically my concerns for Sony, specifically again the PlayStation portion and what their future looks like. And that's because of two big reasons. One is their live service games push, and the second is their streaming device Project Q. After a lackluster showcase this summer, I don't know what I'm getting from Sony. Now, don't get me wrong. Sony is at the top of the game right now. They pull in more revenue than anybody else. That's undeniable facts. But they're doing some things that are concerning, and I think that their focus is in the wrong area. And I'll talk about that in a few. So let's talk about what I think is going to concern me about Sony and what I think they might need to do or where they need to refocus their efforts. With that out of the way, let's begin. Now, before I start, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. It really helps out the channel. But I want to talk about the live service games that Sony's doing. They have this big push into live service that they want to do, and while I do think it is smart, they're trying to release 10 games by like 2025 or 2026 or something like that, which I think is pretty insane. Now, they did acquire Bungie, which does specialize in live service games. And even at that PlayStation showcase, they announced at least 3 of their own shooters that are going to be live service games. That being Fair Games, Concord, and Marathon by Bungie themselves. Now, one of the first things that Bungie did was actually come in and act as, I guess, a liaison or act as someone to vet Sony's live service games. It's been rumored that they actually vetted the Last of Us Factions game mode that we were supposed to get, but wound up not even getting, and having Naughty Dog basically softly announce it on Twitter because they said they had to delay it. On top of that, we know that Deviation Games, which was actually, I think, acquired by Sony recently, and they were one of the companies that were actually making one of these live service games for PlayStation, their game got canceled, apparently because Bungie came in and saw that it just was not good enough and was not going to work in the current market. Now, if you know anything about live service games or video games in general, you know these games are getting more and more expensive, and especially live service games. Now, even though you may have 10 flops that are like, I guess, you have a $300 million flop, a $100 million flop, if you get one of them that sticks, you're set for life. And while I think that Sony is smart to invest into live service games, I think it's kind of worrying that they're trying to just throw stuff at the board until it works. Again, these games are expensive, and while Sony is in a much better financial place than they were some years ago, I worry that they're going to essentially ruin portions of their business that people like about them. People like the single-player cinematic story-driven experiences that Sony makes. And while I'm not privy to every single one of those experiences, I like games like Horizon Forbidden West, despite my qualms with it. I love Ghost of Tsushima, and I love the Spider-Man games. I just think it would be, disrespectful to their fan base almost to ignore those types of experiences going forward. Especially since we have a studio like Naughty Dog that a lot of people love working on multiplayer for The Last of Us rather than another entry into the series or another single player driven experience like Uncharted or even something like Jak and Daxter. While I get the want for that big gangbuster, live service hit, another Fortnite, another Destiny, another COD, I think Sony needs to approach it differently. You have The Last of Us Factions being developed. I think they should just really take that and run with it. The Last of Us is a big enough franchise at this point that they could, I don't want to say exploit it, but they could exploit that and then have some of those live service games right off of the back of that, rather than, just throwing darts at a board hoping one lands in, the bullseye while the rest of them possibly flop. Now, they could all work out and they could all do extremely well. But if anything that I've learned over the past few years about live service games, there's too many of them in the market right now. Rumbleverse ended after like half of a year. Knockout City ended after, I think, less than a year. And a ton of other games trying to replicate the Fortnite success. So I just think it's kind of stupid for Sony to be approaching, I guess, trying to get into the live service market from this angle, especially when they have Bungie. They could make The Last of Us, factions game mode, have Destiny 2 still run alongside that, and then have Bungie just make Marathon, which I think is probably going to be a hit. I don't know. You guys tell me down below. How do you feel about Sony's live service push? Do you think it's going to hurt them or do you think it's going to help them? But the next thing I want to talk about is actually Sony's Project Q. And I'm going to keep it real with you. I just think it's stupid. And I'm not saying that it's stupid for them to release a dedicated handheld for the PlayStation 5 or for themselves. I just think that it's dumb that they released a dedicated handheld streaming device with low battery life, a horrible design, and with a subpar remote play streaming function. The reason we know this is because remote play is already on your phone. I could take my phone right now and stream my PlayStation to my phone. And people do this already. It just doesn't work well. At least not with the official Sony app. There are third-party apps, specifically I know on Android, that allow you to stream to your device and have it be a much better experience on top of letting you use any controller outside of the DualSense or DualShock. It's just asinine to me that Sony would release it, especially with the way it looks. It just looks so slapped together. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that they shouldn't partner with somebody and make this, but the first thing I have to say is this thing needs to be at least less than $150 or less than $200 at least. It needs to be probably around $150 to $100 for anyone to even consider picking up this monstrosity. The second thing is the DualSense controllers drift just as bad as every other modern controller, including the Joy-Cons. Both of my DualSenses have drift. I haven't even had my PlayStation 5 for 7 or 8 months, and I've already got drift on both of my controllers. Heck, I bought a new black controller the week after I got my PlayStation 5, and it started drifting a month after I got the console. So if this thing doesn't have Hall effect sensor sticks, I just think it's done out of the box because it's using regular potentiometer sticks, and it looks like a regular DualShock. On top of that, it just looks unwieldy. It looks too big. It genuinely is too big. They could have made something, I won't even say Vita size. They could have made something the size of the Nintendo Switch or even the size of the Nintendo Switch with these hoary compact controllers on the side of them. And I feel like it would have worked. People wouldn't be as upset by how it looks and how big it looks. It's just beyond me why they would make something like this, especially considering it doesn't play games natively. This really relies on you having a good connection for it to work. And don't get me wrong, there are streaming devices out there, but they also play things natively and can be used for other applications. Microsoft partnered with Logitech to create the G Cloud, which, while it isn't necessarily Microsoft's hardware or anything like that, it is specialized around streaming. And that thing is like $350. Now, Sony could leverage the fact that they're getting people into the PlayStation ecosystem, and they'll make that up with software sales, but I feel like this thing should have just basically been a baby PlayStation 4 that you could take around with you instead of, a streaming device. And it's basically just an Android phone with two DualSense or a half a DualSense on each side slapped together. It's just beyond me that Sony thought this was smart to, release. Especially considering, again, how bad it looks. Because it plans to stream games at 1080p 60 frames per second. And I've been using game streaming quite a bit lately. I've actually been using Xbox Game Pass to play games while I'm at work. I have a telescopic controller for my Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra 5G. So I'm telling you, as someone with a top-of-the-line smartphone who can get full 5G, it's not perfect. There are some times where latency becomes an issue. Like, you'll be playing, it'll be okay, it'll be playable, and then sometimes, despite the image staying the same, general quality, you'll have a few seconds where the controls, just get out of sync. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually think the way Microsoft handles it is fine. It's just the way Sony is gonna handle it, because it's a remote play device. It's not even a cloud streaming device. So it also relies on your PlayStation being hooked up, which I think is another issue because people have data plans with their internet and on top of their phone service plan. So what are they doing to essentially offset this? Because it's going to cost people a lot on their internet, and then it's going to cost people a lot on their phone bill. I'm just speaking from a logistical standpoint. This makes no sense. Because again, with Xbox, I'm at least streaming it via the cloud. I'm not having to connect to the house, even though I can, to basically play my games. I don't know, there's just a lot I have problems with. Hopefully Sony actually announces a competent streaming service behind this, but I doubt they will. Because Sony's at the top, and everything they're doing right now, the live services, I feel like is just reactionary. Especially considering like most of the live service games are on the PlayStation. People are spending all that money on PlayStation. Why worry about it? And then on top of that, they're trying to compete with Microsoft on Microsoft's own turf. There's nothing wrong at all with wanting to create a streaming device or a remote play device. But I feel like you have to be at least half as good as Microsoft's for me to even want to, own something like that. And they're not even half as good as Microsoft in that realm. I've been using Xbox Game Pass cloud streaming. I've been using the remote play function in the house. I've even used Steam Link in my house. Steam Link, which isn't even all that great, is far and away better than PlayStation Remote Play. But I don't know. Tell me how you guys feel in that comment section down below. Do you think Sony is really making the right calls with all this stuff that they've announced? And do you think that they're making a mistake by doing all these live service games and then trying to get into the streaming market the way they are? Because I just don't think they are. I think if they did a slow rollout of streaming services on PlayStation, specifically PlayStation 4, on televisions and then on smartphones, and then slowly built it up from there in betas, I believe it'd work. But they're just, throwing everything at the wall with that streaming handheld, and it's like, how can I trust that to be good when you can't even get it right here or even on PC? I don't know. That's how I feel about it. Tell me how you feel in that comment section down below. This has been your man, Shadicstick. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Share this out with your friends. Remember, all my links are down below in the link tree or the card. Yeah, I believe it's a card. And make sure to follow your boy on Twitter. But we're out of here. Remember, Hot Faraga turns to Cold Bazaga. Chill out with some of my other videos. Peace and have a good one.